Okay, so I know what some of you are probably going to say. Yes, the new Alchemist is a serious improvement over the legacy version of the class, and there are a lot of exciting things about what Paizo has done here, but there are also some very real concerns about how difficult to parse a lot of the language around the remastered Alchemist happens to be. I understand your concerns, but hear me out for a second. I would just like to note that extremely effective and fun to play, but irrationally terrible to actually read, is kind of the Paizo brand for most of their products. Today, we're going to talk about the Player Core 2 for Pathfinder 2nd Edition on today's episode of The Local Disaster Tour Guide. Hello, travelers and tourists. My name is Mark, and I am the local disaster tour guide. That's right, I am a storyteller that really wants to know what the story implications of the skeleton in the cowboy hat are for Galarian. I'm sorry, Paizo, no one believes that's actually a crown. We want to know why the skeleton is in a cowboy hat. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder. Today, I'm going to be doing a mini review of Player Core 2 for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Paizo was kind enough to send me a review PDF of this book, and I've been pretty excited to dig into this book and see what the final leg of this remaster project actually looks like. And I've got to say, there is a lot of exciting stuff in the Player Core 2, and I'm really looking forward to digging into all of the cool things that Paizo is bringing to the table with Player Core 2. I think this book is very exciting. Now, yes, as I've noted, Paizo did send me this PDF for purposes of doing a review, and I want to say thank you to Paizo for giving me a chance to do this, but I do want to say that Paizo did not in any way attempt to influence this review or what I was going to say about this product, so the thoughts and opinions in this video are entirely my own. As with any review on this channel, I do always encourage you to try a product before you buy, because first-hand experience is ultimately going to give you the best idea of whether or not a product is right for you. I will do my best in this video to share my honest thoughts about this book, but if you can, borrow this book from a friend, check it out at your local gaming store, something to that effect. That is ultimately going to give you the best insight into what this product has to offer and whether or not it's something you want to add to your collection. Now, quick note on today's review, this is going to be a little bit of a shorter review than I would normally do. I have been sick for about the last 4 days, and today is the first day that I actually feel good enough to actually record a video, and I know that this video is coming out about a week later than everybody else who's been talking about Player Core 2, but that's just kind of the way that things felt for me. I will tell you that in reading through this product, I've seen a lot of exciting things, and I do like a lot of what Paizo has done. My overall thoughts about this product really line up with the book that the Player Core 2 is replacing. If you go way back in my video history to the Advanced Player Guide review, I said in that review that the Advanced Player's Guide wasn't necessarily something that you needed in order to run the game effectively, but that in many ways it fleshed out the game in ways that just made the entire package so much more fun to engage with. And honestly, that's kind of the summary of this review here. The Player Core 2 revamps a lot of stuff that was found in the Advanced Player's Guide, although there are a few extra things I'll point out as we go along. But at the end of the day, it is mostly just a collection of options that you add to what was included in Player Core 1 to really flesh out the system and give you the whole picture of what Pathfinder 2nd Edition has to offer. So while I wouldn't say that this book is necessarily critical in order to run the game, I do think that it adds enough to the game to create a very exciting and enjoyable experience overall. What I'm saying is I do like this product. In this video, I'm just going to be doing a quick overview of the contents of this book and some of my very surface level thoughts about what Paizo has included. But in the follow-up videos that you will see going live probably after Gen Con, I'm going to be diving deeper into a lot of the specific content in this book because there is some really exciting stuff that I am ready to dig into. Paizo has brought a lot of fun stuff to the table. Of course, before we get into all of that, if you enjoy this video, please remember to do all of the stuff that supports this channel. Like, share, and subscribe. You can check out my free Discord or my Patreon. All of the relevant links will be in the video description below. And with all that out of the way, let's get started. So in Player Core 1, the new options that are presented are going to be divided into 6 chapters. Chapter 1 is Ancestries and Backgrounds. Chapter 2 is Classes, and that's probably the one that is going to get the most focus from the Pathfinder community, and arguably for very good reason. And then Chapter 3 is Archetypes, Chapter 4 is Feats, Chapter 5 is Spells, and Chapter 6 is the Treasure Trove. So we're going to take a quick look at what each of these chapters represent and what kind of options they offer for your Pathfinder 2e game. Chapter 1 is Ancestries and Backgrounds, and a lot of the content in this chapter is very, very similar to what we saw with the original Advanced Player's Guide in Legacy 2e. For example, the new backgrounds and the rare background options, those, at least as far as I've been able to dig, seem to be identical to the previous offerings in Pathfinder 2e. The new background stuff I don't think treads any new ground here, which, if I want to be a little bit nitpicky, does bother me just a bit, because the rare backgrounds for Pathfinder 2e allow for some very interesting stories and some very interesting characters without necessarily breaking the balance of the game, and I kind of wish that Paizo had dug a little bit deeper into the rare backgrounds in this book, because that is one of those little niches of the rules that I think could be explored a little bit more. However, backgrounds is not really a huge deal in terms of the overall content of the book. Most people who come to Chapter 1, they're going to be looking at the ancestry side of the equation, and when you're looking at that, there is a lot of fun stuff here. This book is going to offer 8 remastered ancestries and 3 versatile heritages for your players to use. The 8 ancestries in this book are the Catfolk, the Hobgoblins, the Kolos, the Kobolds, the Lizardfolk, the Ratfolk, the Tengu, and the Tripkey. Now, things like the Catfolk, the Ratfolk, and the Tengu were previously offered in the Advanced Player's Guide. Some of the other ancestries that are listed in this book, like the Hobgoblins, the Kolos, and the Tripkeys, are actually pulled from some of the Lost Omens line. They've taken some of the Lost Omens options that Paizo presented, and they've brought them into this book with a little bit of a remaster update to them. For those of you who are curious, the Tripkeys are the updated Griplies, or Frogfolk, that can sometimes be found in the Mwange Expanse. As for versatile heritages, there are 3 versatile heritages in this book: the Dhampir, the new Dragonblood option, and the Duskwalkers. Now, personally, the Duskwalker versatile heritage is one of my favorite versatile heritages in this entire game. I think it is a very unique and interesting option, so I'm very excited that Paizo brought that back. And then you have the new Dragonblood option that allows you to play characters that have a connection to dragons in their family lineage, and that represents a lot of character concepts that people have been interested in for Pathfinder 2e that weren't necessarily there before. Previously, if you wanted to play a character that was related to dragons, you were either looking at something like a sorcerer, or you were trying to lean all in on some kobold options. But the new Dragonblood versatile heritage really opens things up so that a wider variety of characters can dig into those kinds of stories. There have also been some lore changes on kobolds, where they are no longer just solely obsessed with dragons. Personally, I like a lot of the new lore stuff for kobolds, and I really wish I had the time to stop and dig into everything on the kobolds, because there's a lot of fun stuff there, but there's a lot of content in this book, and I'm trying to keep this video short. For those of you who are looking at the ancestries or the versatile heritages in this book, they're going to be laid out in the same fashion that you would see for the ancestry options in Player Core 1. So here we have the first page of the trip key. It gives you some general information, physical description, a discussion of what Trip Key Society looks like. It goes into their beliefs, some of their popular edicts and anathema, some of the things you might use to build out your character's personal code if you chose to play a Trip Key. And then on the next page, you have this long sidebar here that gives you kind of the base abilities of the Trip Key. Then you get a list of their heritages. And then after that, it's going to go into the ancestry feats associated. So 1st level feats, 5th level feats, 9th level feats, 13th level feats, 17th level feats, the variety of options that you have for this ancestry at each of those levels. And all of the ancestries are essentially going to be laid out the exact same way. Since the Dragonblood Versatile Heritage is one of the new options in this book, I did at least want to stop by here and check out the art and highlight a couple of the options for the Dragonblood, just so you know what kind of things it brings to the table. So for example here, we have a Primal Dragonblood character, and you'll notice with the Dragonblood feats that there are lineages. There's the Arcane Dragonblood, Divine Dragonblood, Occult Dragonblood, and Primal Dragonblood. Lineages are something we have seen previously with Versatile Heritages in Pathfinder 2e. Originally, lineage was a trait that was attached to certain first level feats as a way of further distinguishing some aspect of your character's heritage. In the remaster, lineages are still first level feats, but you can see here that they have essentially split off the lineages from the rest of the first level feats, because if you take a lineage, it's only available at first level, and you cannot retrain out of it. The actual rules implications haven't changed here, but I do like the fact that Paizo has separated lineages from the other first level feats, because I do think that makes it a little bit clearer visually how these options are intended to work. But beyond the lineages, you can see some of the other Dragonblood options. You have things like Breath of the Dragon, or Scaly Hide, or even Form of the Dragon, representing all sorts of different draconic abilities that you can pick up during the course of play. Chapter 2 is the Classes chapter, and this is very much the chapter where there is so much that I'm almost afraid to even brush up against this chapter, just because of the amount of content that you could really dive into in this chapter. Paizo has taken the time to remaster 8 classes and share them in this book. They are the Alchemist, Barbarian, Champion, Investigator, Monk, Oracle, Sorcerer, and Swashbuckler. Now overall, I would say that the Alchemist, the Oracle, and the Swashbuckler probably got the most significant updates in this book. And on the opposite end, the Monk and the Investigator probably walked away with the fewest actual updates from the remaster, but every class has been touched in one way or another. Now, I will tell you, of the various classes in this book, the Oracle is chef's kiss. I absolutely love the updates they have done to the Oracle, and I am very, very excited to try out an Oracle at the gaming table. I think Paizo nailed the Oracle remaster, and I just think it is phenomenally well done. The other classes are, for the most part, pretty solid. There is a strong thread running around the internet right now about some of the wording on the Alchemist is clear as mud, and honestly, they're right. When I first heard some of the other content creators complaining about the language of the Alchemist, I was like, I don't know what you were talking about. I thought it was perfectly understandable. I completely understood those rules the first time I read them. And then Ronald the Rules Lawyer pointed out at least 2 things that the Alchemist can do now that I completely missed reading through the rules. And when I realized that I had completely missed those 2 things, I was like, okay, I think the other content creators are right. the wording on the Remaster Alchemist leaves a lot to be desired. Still, once you can suss out how the new Alchemist works, I think you will find that the new version of the Alchemist is very engaging, is very useful, and I think it would still be a lot of fun to play at the gaming table. If I had to pick a class from this list of 8 that I am the least excited for post-remaster, well, longtime viewers of this channel probably would not be surprised to learn it's the Investigator. I have a history on this channel of kind of being rough on the Investigator. It's not my favorite class to begin with, and I've had some design issues with the Investigator essentially since day one, and if I'm being honest, the remaster really hasn't done anything to address what I thought were the design gaps in the Investigator. It's still a functional and usable class, but if you take a class that I wasn't very excited for before, and you don't really update it that much, ultimately that leaves it where the Investigator is probably the weakest offering in this book. But overall, I do feel like the different classes that have been remastered for this book are, for the most part, very solid. The changes are good changes, and I think that players will appreciate the vast majority of the work that Paizo has done here. Again, we're not going to dive too deep into all of the content on the classes. I'm trying to keep this video short, but the layout of the classes is exactly what you would expect from the Player Core 1. Here's the first page of the Barbarian, and you see that key attribute, hit points, description, sidebar, all of that information is presented the exact same way that we're already used to. The next page will get your advancement table, and it'll start talking about the different class features. And if you somehow haven't heard about it yet, here is the gem that they gave the remastered Barbarian, the Quick Tempered ability. This is a free action that you use when you roll initiative to begin combat in Rage. Basically, it's going to remove the action tax of Rage when you first enter combat. And for the sharp-eyed among you, you may notice that there is something conspicuously missing in the new version of the Rage ability. But we'll save those conversations for when I come back and talk about these classes more in depth. Moving on to Chapter 3, we actually have what I think is the main reason you want to invest in this book. Yes, I realize most people are going to be focused on Chapter 2 and the new classes and the remastered work on the classes, but one of the secret strengths of Pathfinder 2nd Edition is actually its archetype system. Whether you are using the free archetype variant or not, the archetype rules in Pathfinder 2e are one of the best examples of rules in a gaming system that I've ever seen. And if you talk about the ways that Pathfinder 2e really pushed the tabletop RPG landscape forward, the archetype system is a fantastic example of this. Pathfinder 2e does not rely on multi-classing like you see in older game systems. They use an archetype system, and while Player Core 1 discusses archetyping a little bit, Player Core 2 is where they really dive into what archetypes can be inside of this system. And as archetypes is one of the major strengths of Pathfinder 2e, that's one of the things that makes this book a really strong selling point. So in Chapter 3 Archetypes, you're going to get to learn a little bit about archetype dedications, what that means, what a multi-class dedication is. You're going to get a few clarifying rules, and then it's going to move into spellcasting archetypes and how spellcasting archetypes are structured. And then one of the really cool things that they did is alchemical archetypes now have a similar structure to spellcasting archetypes. There is a lot of nuance in how this changes up alchemical archetypes, and I'm not going to dive into all of that here, but I do want to say that this is a positive change and something that I think brings some serious value to this game overall. Then you have a big list of all of the archetypes that are included in this book. Some of them are multi-class archetypes like Champion or Alchemist, but most of the archetypes in this chapter are broader and more generalized archetypes covering things like the Bounty Hunter, the Beastmaster, the Medic, or the Gladiator. If you are new to Pathfinder 2nd Edition, this should clue you into the fact that the archetype system in this game is so much broader and so much more creative than old ideas like multi-classing used to be, and it really is one of the major selling points of this game. So, for example, this is the Snarecrafter archetype, and it gives you a description of what the Snarecrafter is. It talks about the Snarecrafter dedication. Every archetype begins with a dedication feat. This kind of allows you to access the Snarecrafter options. You would take a dedication feat in place of a normal class feat, and then you could have access to other feats from that archetype. And then it just lists out some of the other feat options that you have under this particular archetype. Now, one thing that I think is worth noting, Paizo did give Rangers a little bit of a benefit if they choose to go into Snarecrafter. In Player Core 1, all of the snare stuff for Rangers was removed from that class. There have been some people who've been frustrated that those options weren't available for Rangers, and you can tell that basically what Paizo did is they just kind of stuffed those options into the Snarecrafter archetype and placed some special rules for Rangers who go into this archetype to kind of streamline how these options are presented. So if you're playing a Ranger who wants to make use of snares, you can totally do that, and there are some small benefits to help you along the way. Then we move on to Chapter 4 Feats, which covers the general and skill feats that can be found in this book. You have some tables covering both the general feats and the skill feats that are available, and for the most part, the options that are presented here are going to correspond to what was previously available in the Advanced Player's Guide. There's not a lot of stuff that just jumps out as particularly new or unique compared to what was in the legacy version of this game. Most of the stuff here is just some minor updates. There are a few cool items worth noting. There is now a thievery skill feat called Dirty Trick. So if you remember the Dirty Trick maneuver from Pathfinder 1st Edition, they've brought that forward to 2nd Edition as the Dirty Trick maneuver under the thievery skill. I'm not going to go into all of the rules here. The channel Swing Ripper did a good discussion of this particular skill feat, so if you want some discussion on Dirty Trick and its implications for the game, I would go check his work out because he's already actually covered this specific option. Another option that I find particularly interesting is the Tumbling Theft skill feat, mostly because this is a skill feat that requires you to be expert in both acrobatics and thievery. Essentially, this is a skill feat that allows you to combine what you can do with one skill, acrobatics, and another skill, thievery, and kind of mix those two things together. It's the only example I have found in this particular book of mixing two skills together with a skill feat, but I do think that this is some interesting mechanical ground, and this could be one of those small niches of game design that Paizo could dig into in the future, where I think there's a lot of fun potential. Like I said, most of the options in the Feats chapter is stuff that we've previously seen in the legacy version of Pathfinder 2e, so essentially most of this is just updated content for the remaster, but the options here are still going to be usable, and you're going to have some of your classic options like Bon Mot for diplomacy, or Sanctify Water for religion. You're definitely going to have some good options here. The next chapter is Chapter 5, which is the Spells chapter, and keeping with some of the previous work that Paizo has done, you can find a lot of fun artwork in this chapter. Like the full page spread for the Spells chapter is pretty cool. I like the artwork here. But this chapter is going to give you the new spells for the different traditions, your arcane spells, your divine spells, your occult spells, and your primal spells. Every tradition is going to have new options for cantrips, as well as first rank spells, second rank spells, and on all the way up to 9th rank spells. Only one tradition gets a new 10th rank spell in this book, and that is actually the Primal tradition, which is going to get the new 10th rank Primal Herd spell, allowing you to turn willing creatures into a herd of mammoths. Definitely a fun option. Some of the classic spells that weren't in Player Core 1 do show up in this chapter, so if you were missing spells like Vomit Swarm or Web, or Resplendent Mansion, things like that, you will see some of those that have actually shown up in this book. And I think that's mostly a consideration of they just didn't have all the space that they wanted in Player Core 1. But if you're playing a spellcasting character, there are definitely a lot of options here. And while we're in this chapter, just one more time, Paizo. no one believes that that is not a skeleton in a cowboy hat. We want to know what's going on with the skeleton in the cowboy hat. Then the final chapter is going to be Treasure Trove, which is going to be gear and loot for your characters to use. At the beginning, you're going to get some quick blurbs about the types of gear in this section. It's going to talk about weapons and materials, armor and armaments, alchemical items, snares, momentary magic, trappings of power, and of course there's going to be some treasure tables at the end that allow you to kind of quickly dig through the options that are presented. The weapons section begins with some of the new traits that are appropriate to the weapons in this section, and then you have descriptions of the new weapons, along with the table describing the stats that are associated with them. You're going to get discussions of precious material, like here we have a discussion of dragon hide and how that affects items that are made out of it. And you can very quickly tell that the layout of this section corresponds to a lot of what we've seen with the treasure section that is currently found in the GM Core. The layout and structure we saw in the GM Core, it's exactly what you've come to expect. That being said, Paizo has done a little bit of work to clean up this section compared to the Legacy version. Like here in the Alchemy section, they've done something I think is pretty cool. Once you get past the alchemical items table, first you find a section on alchemical bombs, and then you come to a section on alchemical elixirs. Next up you have mutagens, and then alchemical poisons. Finally, you have alchemical tools coming in at the end. I feel like the presentation of the alchemical items is just cleaner than it's been in previous products, and I had an easier time reading through this section, and I appreciate that Paizo did the work to organize the treasure trove, the different items that players might pick up, in a way that feels accessible and approachable. And of course, at the end of the treasure trove, you have the treasure tables that breaks up your items by level and by consumable versus permanent, so that you can kind of go through and see the different options, the price for the different options, and quick page references, so that if you're interested in using some of the stuff in this book, you can kind of quickly reference what's available. These treasure tables are pretty nice, but they do bring up something of a small criticism of the remaster as a whole, in that these treasure tables cover the Player Core 2 options specifically, and do not include any of the treasure options from the GM Core. I consider, and I imagine most people would consider, the options in Player Core 2 to be core options to the game. These are things that most players should reasonably feel like they would have access to, and it's just a little bit frustrating to have two separate books, two separate sets of tables discussing the treasure options for players in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I realize if you combine all the treasure in the GM Core with all of the treasure in the Player Core 2, that would take up a ton of space, and I realize why Paizo broke things up the way that they did, but I really wish that there was an easily referenceable tool for the treasure in Pathfinder 2e, because this is one of those aspects of the game where there's a lot of fun granularity, but it's not easy to reference across products and get an idea of what's truly available. Overall, it's a small nitpick. I'm glad to have the stuff that's in here, but it is something that you notice when you're going through this section of the Player Core 2, so I felt like it was worth discussing. But with that, we've come to the end of my overview and review of Player Core 2. Now, I do realize that I have flown through this content very quickly, even by the standards of my normal book reviews. Again, sorry I've been sick for the last week. Again, sorry that I've been sick for the last week. But in summary, I do think that this book really does help flesh out Pathfinder 2e the same way that the Advanced Player's Guide did for the Legacy version of this game. I think a lot of the options are exciting. I think there's a lot of fun stuff that players can use, and I think it opens up the game to a lot of great character concepts. So this is very much a book that I think really has a lot to offer, and if you are seriously interested in Pathfinder 2e, I do think that Player Core 2 is a book that is worth adding to your collection at some point in time. And again, while I think a lot of people are going to focus in on chapters 1 and 2, the ancestries and the classes that are presented in this book, Really, I think the best thing that this book offers is the in-depth look at the archetype system. Archetypes really is one of the best things about this game, and this is the book that's going to give you a good broad perspective on what archetypes are in Pathfinder 2e. So, if you are interested in using archetypes, and especially if you're interested in the free archetype variant that's very popular, this book is going to be a solid purchase because of everything that it brings in that aspect of the game. Still, the time has come for me to turn this conversation over to you. What are your thoughts about the Player Core 2, and are you excited about this product and the changes that Paizo has made in updating a lot of their content to the remaster? Do you have any particular questions about this book or some of the updates that you would like me to cover as I go in and take a look at some of the specific things that are offered in this product in future videos? If so, jump down to the comments section and leave your questions there, and be sure to share your thoughts and observations about the Player Core 2 while you're down there. I'm always excited to interact with you and hear what you have to say. I learn a ton of stuff from this community. Next week, if all goes according to plan, I will be at Gen Con, so if you're going to be at Gen Con, please be sure to look me up while you're there. I would love to meet you. And as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Have a wonderful day.